A pound of that same merchant's flesh is yours. The court awards it, and the law does give it.
Most rightful, Judge.
And you must cut this flesh from off his breast. The court awards it, and the law allows it.
Most learned, Judge. A sentence.
In 2012, a German court held that circumcision of babies and children constitutes criminal assault. Under existing United States law and international human rights declarations as well, circumcision already violates boys' absolute rights to equal protection, bodily integrity, autonomy, and freedom to choose their own religion. A physician has a legal duty to protect children from unnecessary interventions. Physicians who obtain parental permission through spurious claims or omissions, or rely on the American Academy of Pediatrics position, also risk liability for misleading parents. Circumcision violates the cardinal principles of medical ethics to respect autonomy, self-determination, to do good, to do no harm, and to be just. Without a clear medical intention, circumcision must be deferred until the child can provide his own fully informed consent. Circumcision is usually performed for religious, cultural, and personal reasons. Early claims about its medical benefits have been proven false. The American Academy of Pediatrics and the Centers for Disease Prevention and Control have made many scientifically untenable claims promoting circumcision that run counter to the consensus of Western medical organisations. The foreskin is a complex structure that protects and moisturises the head of the male member. And being the most densely innervated and sensitive portion of that part is essential to providing the complete sexual response. Circumcision, the removal of this structure, is non-therapeutic, painful, irreversible surgery that also risks serious physical injury, psychological sequelae, and death. Men rarely volunteer for it, and increasingly circumcised men are expressing their resentment about it. I have a strong sense of empathy, and I'm a reflecting person. I'm desperately grasping for anything beyond initial disgust at First Testament thinking. But it's First Testament belief, not thinking. I think, therefore I am. Slaughter your firstborn child and abuse your other children forevermore isn't thinking. Parent believers given the responsibility to act for their babies against all legal precedent. Hugely tenacious legal representation and placement within secular authorities, and then justification because of the justification of the secular authority. And it's big business. Antiseptic herbs were known in ancient Egypt, and every time since they perhaps weren't necessarily accessible at all times if you're a slave building pyramids or something. Ancient Egypt was much more humid and tropical than it is now. Smells carry in hot and dry much more, but in humid places, bacteria thrive. It's an instruction when you're going through IVF not to have oral sex because the saliva is a slight spermicide as well as an antiseptic. Perhaps some individuals need the desensitization over time so that they're not TWC Weinstein-esque habitually affected. Or perhaps the cause and effect works inversely. By exposure and desensitization, other passions are brought to the fore. Ambitions, intrigue, and sort of gallows humour. How does such a prehistoric practices persist? Perceived needs or necessities from thousands of years ago might be needed again for some post-apocalyptic future like the walk. So there might be pogroms in the future, there might be zombies in the future, so prehistoric practices are taught and maintained as survival wisdoms, not to be forgotten at any cost. The cost is pogroms, not to be forgotten, but the past is there to be learned from. I know that's hard to believe. I'll get to that later, actually. In the Philippines, a tropical country, the government has for generations had a summer special offer. You bring your son to hospital and we'll have him circumcised for you. Pretty much like a public health campaign. Street children don't have the facilities for washing, perhaps, and bacteria and the like, and transferring things to women. Now, in some ways, American approach to healthcare for some can be similar to a developing world country. Numbers of American boys are circumcised more or less at birth as part of a healthcare package by First Testament ethos hospitals. There are ways where this is easily reversible and very difficult to reverse. Too much reversing meant that some Jewish leaders decreed that there was insufficient cutting if the second layer wasn't irreversibly cut. In the Philippines and South Sea Island cultures, it's commonplace to make a butterfly-type incision in the top, and often has been the culture of a incision on the underside into the urethra that causes much more significant interventions. What happens to the foreskins that are removed in American hospitals? They are extremely valuable to women's face cream industry. In a laboratory, they can be regrown to many times their original size. Meters squared of foreskin can be produced from one. Wonderful if it's used for burns victims, skin grafts and the like, but sold for $100,000 to cosmetic face cream manufacturers. It sort of accounts for the prevalence of the practice in modern day America. Certainly not all Semitic cultures have circumcised at 8 days old as a fundamental commandment of their religion. Muslims usually wait for some sort of informed decision before or after puberty. For the child abuse of the child doing this is only really a First Testament culture thing. The consenting of parents to child abuse of their own child through belief goes much further than just the cutting. Israel Orthodox and American Orthodox Jewish families have the mother pass the child to the father, and a godparent give the child to the moel, often a rabbi, often a virgin, just doing it for a hobby. But the parents hand the baby child over to be abused in front of their face. The religious leader then makes the circumcision and sucks clean blood to where she has made the incision with their mouth. It's something that's come to my attention again. Whenever I've learnt of this before, I've wanted to not believe it, and I've wanted to quickly forget it. The religious leader sucks the baby child's little bébé. This is something that the child will never go to heaven. Whatever they do in their life, they won't go to heaven unless this happens. This is fundamental and centric to the religion, and certainly the Orthodox. And it is fundamentally child abuse, and routinely courts in America choose to think otherwise. Whether you hit your child is one thing, that's child abuse, but having someone work on your baby child's bébé is up for debate, apparently. In 1972 and much more recently. Instances of a more religious leader giving herpes to their baby child of a religious persuasion in the state authority and judicial system leads to a folding of prosecution under sustained legal protection and veracity of organised public opinion. Even using the horrors of the Holocaust as an indicator of it could happen again, because it has happened before that objections have been raised to this religious child abuse and resulted in pogroms and Holocaust, rather than that bébé exists and is still carried out might possibly be the reason for the pogroms and Holocaust in some small way, not an indicator that it might happen again. Now, for Jewish burial, circumcision on a dead child that dies before the 8 days needs to be carried out on the corpse. I'm unclear as to whether bébé occurs, the sucking occurs on the corpse by the religious leader. to cross streams at the toilet bowl with his brother. Like something with lightsabers out of Star Wars. And when those flows of urine collide, it splashes outside of the bowl, and squeals could be heard, and Father had to join in. The younger child, as is still his way, had eased to pulling back his foreskin. When the older child was spraying, like when you first turn a hose on, and it goes out at all hours of the clock. So Father says that you must pull back your foreskin. This is a point that's laboured, and it's intensely painful. For this particular child, this is 4 or 5 years old. I'm sure it would have happened in its own time for each individual person's own need. But for the parents' insistence that this must be done, I didn't want to try because it was so intensely painful. They consulted a doctor, and the doctor was very experienced at this and sort of did it as a hobby. At times, there was a consultation with the doctor and the parents, and the child of reasonable mental capacity, but not anything that couldn't really be influenced by a Mars bar, probably. The doctor did explain that it would probably happen in its own time. He could do the operation. While I'm here after the examination, why might I want to have it done? It can help people be more ambitious and concentrate on other things. It will be painful for quite a while. Why is the Father insisting that the pulling back of the foreskin by the child must be done? It mustn't necessarily be done. The protective hutch over the lower half of the torso for a long time after in the hospital is well remembered to keep the sheets from touching the very sensitive, newly circumcised purple end. And then again, bedridden at home with a similar sort of device of cushions that wasn't as effective. Bedridden for a similar period of time as measles or mumps. The same parents sending the child to measles parties of children, mumps parties of children, to get it over with. The same wisdoms were criminalised in COVID. All Jewish slaves must be circumcised. Perhaps the original and eternal pound of flesh of Shakespeare. I'm all metric, but a pound, foreskin weighing a pound, that must be a conger. Determined to get what's theirs by right, no matter how it may affect anyone else and regardless of the consequence. That is pretty much the Jewish protection of Bebe. The oral sucking by the religious leader of the child, 8-day-old baby's penis. Wars have been and will be fought over it for the right of the traditional child It is 20-year-old news, plus that the foreskin of a circumcised infant, a piece of foreskin the size of a postage stamp, can produce approximately 4 acres of skin tissue in laboratory gel. Artificial skin derived from foreskins is thought to be successful where donor skin grafts is not, because the newborn cells don't rouse the host's immune system. If they did, mothers' bodies would reject fetuses. Foreskins are also sometimes used to create the structural framework for the epidermis. The lowered risk of infection is vital to the success of the lab-grown skin. Another plus is the process results in minimal scarring. Patients regain most sensations from nerve endings, and if the burn victim is a child, the new skin will grow with the patient as he or she ages. Still, the process is not yet widespread 20 years ago and has a few difficulties to overcome. One, the skin cells divide in the lab fairly slowly over weeks. The sheets of skin that leave the lab must be used almost immediately, and they are so fragile that they can be difficult to transport. The lab-grown skin is also expensive. A 2001 article claimed that 8 by 10 inch, 20 by 25 centimetre sheet of skin costs about $2,000. American, as they say. Many babies circumcised at 8 days old in America and Israel grow up to have pubic hair all the way down to where their foreskin would start. A German research organisation grows human skin from the stem cells of human hair, and they've created an automated production line process for the manufacture of Since the First World War, doctors could cut skin from another part of the patient's body, stretch it and perform a transplant, but it's a painful procedure. It wasn't an option for patients who didn't have enough skin left to use. Doctors also tried using skin from cadavers, donors from the victim's family and even other species, but the patient's immune system usually rejected these grafts. They couldn't simply give burn victims an increase of immunosuppressants either, as they were already so vulnerable to infection and weak. They had success growing skin cells from the patient's own skin. If patients treated and burn, for example, some skin cells in bat and do biopsy and sent up to a laboratory where they will grow thanks to nutrient feedings and vertical division. The process took a few weeks. Eventually the cells divided until they created a sheet of skin 100 times the size of the original sample. While skin cells that keep dividing are cancerous, the skin sheets have so far returned to normal once engrafted. Sometimes the lab-grown skin is treated with an antibacterial protein to reduce the risk of infection while increasing the chance of transplant success. In 2014 it was estimated that 85% of American men are circumcised. It was a practice in the 1900s to prevent masturbation. How successful that was in Canada is difficult to get data on. In Canada, between 1970 and 1995, it's dropped from 50% to 30%. It's dropped the number of circumcisions. In America, the American Academy of Pediatrics has a lot to answer for, publishing statements in favour of. So 91% of white men, 76% of black and 44% of Hispanic men aged 14 to 59 were missold as circumcisions for medical science and laboratory profit. Bizarrely, Medicaid is available for infants in all American states, and there is no NHS in America. At 14 you have some sort of mental capacity to make informed decisions, but the information made available for you to make those decisions can be heavily slanted and heavily influencing. Introduce Brexit now. How people were obviously informed about Brexit but seriously missold. Brexit, heavily American guided, was in large part about having a trade agreement. Certainly an American trade agreement was heavily guided by getting access to the NHS, breaking it up and then selling back the same drugs to a divided and ruled version of the NHS without the economies of scale that government and national organisation can have, and subsidise highly inflated commercial prices for the drugs. But also the American Academy of Paediatrics, the AAP, would undoubtedly have been after our young male babies' foreskins. Brexit was all about Americans getting our foreskins of half our newborn population. In America, neonatal circumcisions started being much more outside of hospitals, skewing hospital discharge data. Many parents' decisions are described as preconceived. In the so-called United Kingdom, 15% are circumcised. That's serious untapped resources, isn't it? Millions, tens of millions of little bit hair that can be needlessly interfered with and be grown into so many acres of skin that there aren't that many wars that you can make to require so many skin grafts, but it can be used to cover robotics. Skin can now be covering robotics, humanoid, real-looking, real-feeling robots. The apple from the Garden of Eden. Making toys for masturbators, initially just guessing who will pay the premium prices of the first issue product, is that the destination of our foreskins? Tricked from us by Brexit. All of Europe, the circumcision rate is less than 15%, even lower in Danish boys. They like their bacon. Generally, the more northern the latitude, the lower the circumcision rate. In Spain, it's very low, but I suspect that it's got more to do with the historical expulsion of the Moors. Israel's circumcision rate is approaching 95%. Ethos of a First Testament school makes a mockery of child safeguarding and potentially local government, depending on its makeup, and sadly also the courts, where vast amounts of time can be pro bono and protective, like tantrum type rights of maintaining the traditional child abuser because it's some tradition. The pet is archaic and there's no place for it. The exploitation and the exploitation of the justification of sufferings past and tradition cannot be justified within a modern safeguarding context. I have moments where I self-identify as a slave, and the majority of circumcised America are the economic slave majority of the few. I have friends, I know it's hard to believe, I have friends that are trans. I don't believe that Mohels would. Trans incorporates a wide variety of interventions. Some just go as far as cross-dressing and makeup. Some think about and actually do breast enhancement surgery and hormone treatments. After legally convincing a doctor they are legally a different sex. Some have a member fashioned, some have a member removed and turned into an orifice. Or need to forever artificially lubricate, the glands being closer to the entrance rather than inverted, leading to the upper part of a vulva. Even if it's slightly bigger than naturally born women vulvas, obviously a hysterectomy isn't usually a sexual identity decision. But on pseudo-religious grounds, should American parents be able to make these sorts of decisions for their infant children or their adopted children? Is that any more irrational than thousands of year-old traditional? Age of consent seems to be 18 now, from 16 and 21. Surely it's rational that 18 a child can then make a decision for themselves. A compromised transitional position might be that they've got mental capacity enough to make that decision when they're around puberty. Improvements in education worldwide certainly make that much more feasible. Just look at some of the rock and roll decisions of the 1950s, 60s and even 70s. Or should age of consent be adjusted in line with mental capacity and education? What age is an adult and when can they make the decision to drink alcohol, take drugs? When will drugs be legal and safe and taxed? The sexual exploitation of babies by BP is
Take a good look around you now, and you'll find where you are.
A pound of that same merchant's flesh is yours. The court awards it, and the law does give it.
Most rightful judge.
And you must cut this flesh from off his breast. The court awards it, and the law allows it.
Most learned judge. A sentence.
A little. There is something else. This bond does give you here no drop of blood. The words expressly are a pound of flesh. Take then your bond. Take then your pound of flesh. But in the cutting of it, if you do shed one drop of Christian blood, your lands and goods are by the laws of Venice confiscate. And to the state of Venice.
Oh, upright judge. Mark Jew. Learn
Shall see the act. For as you urge on justice, be assured, you shall have justice more than you desire.
I take the offer, then.
Pay the bond twice.
And let the Christian go.
Here is the money.
Soft. Therefore, prepare you to cut off the flesh. Shed then no blood, nor cut you less nor more, but just a pound of flesh. If you take more or less than a just pound, be it but so much as makes it light or heavy, in the substance or division of the 20th part of one poor scruple, nay, if the scale do turn but in the estimation of a hair, you die, and all your goods are confiscated. You shall have nothing but your forfeiture, to be so taken at your peril, Jew.
By the devil, give him good of it. I'll stay, no longer question.
Harry Jew, the law has yet another hold on you. It is enacted in the laws of Venice. If it be proved against an alien, that by direct or indirect attempts he seek the life of any citizen, the party against which he does contrive shall seize 1/2 of his goods. The other half comes to the privy coffer of the state. And the offender's life lies in the mercy of the Duke only. Against all other voice.